What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. Today I'm going over the recently released Rhino Rocktober 2025 list. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So if you're not familiar with what Rocktober is, Rhino does a couple of events during the year. They do Start Your Year Off Right in January, and then they do Rocktober in October. So every Friday during those months, they do special releases. Sometimes they're limited, sometimes they'll do colored variants, sometimes they do box sets. A lot of times it's just stuff that hasn't been available on vinyl in a really long time. I've long looked at Rocktober as like a bridge between Record Store Day in the spring and Record Store Day Black Friday in the fall. So there's 5 Fridays in the month of October this year. So we get 5 Fridays they're releasing stuff on, and there's a lot of stuff coming out for October. I think this is the biggest release list I've ever seen for October. Generally, there's like 25 to 30 releases over the month. This year, I think there's 43 total releases. So it's a lot for me to go over in one video. So I'm going to break this up and probably do a series of videos over the next couple of days. But in typical Rocktober fashion, the very first Friday of the month, October 3rd, is the big release day. There's going to be 16 Rocktober releases for that day. So today I'm going to go over just those releases for October 3rd. Then come back to the channel tomorrow and I'll go over probably the next 2 weeks for releases. The first release I've got for October 3rd is Black Sabbath, We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. Came out back in 1976. It's the greatest hits compilation. It's a 2 LP release. It's going to be on translucent green vinyl. It's going to be about $35. This compilation helped introduce an entirely new generation to the greatness of Black Sabbath and really the origins of heavy metal. What I always found really interesting about this greatest hits compilation is, even though Black Sabbath had released 6 albums at that time period, this greatest hits compilation really only focused on their first 4. But it was a huge album. It would go on to sell over 2 million copies here in the US. Even though I've got all the Ozzy era Black Sabbath albums, I have a copy of this also. You know, sometimes it's nice to just kind of throw on greatest hits compilation. I have a copy of it, so I don't need to grab a copy of it for October. This next one, I'm not all that familiar with. So this is Death from Above, 1979. You're a Woman, I'm a Machine. Came out in 2004 as their debut studio album. It's coming out on clear with pink splatter vinyl. It's going to run about $32. This is one of those albums that go on and become kind of a cult classic album. It was hugely influential album in the mid 2000s indie rock scene. I've only heard a couple of songs off it. I don't think I've ever actually sat down and listened to the entire album. I'm actually more familiar with their second album, The Physical World, that they released in 2014. So I definitely need to go back through and check out this first album. There's also Made in Japan by Deep Purple coming out, released in 1972. It's a 2 LP release. This is the new Steven Wilson remix version of it. It's going to run about $35. It was recorded in August 1972 in Osaka, Japan. It included a lot of their best known tracks. This was actually only supposed to be, initially, it was just supposed to be a Japanese only release. I think it was a couple months later they finally released it in the UK. And then it wasn't until, I think it was the next year, they released it here in the US. I've never been a huge fan of Deep Purple, but I picked this up on vinyl back in the mid-90s at a flea market for a couple of dollars. It's a great live album. I don't know. We'll see if I end up grabbing that one when it gets released. You've also got the Distillers Coral Fang coming out, released in 2003. It was their 3rd studio album. Actually, to date, it's their last studio album. This is going to be on red and black splatter vinyl. It's going to run about $25. Coral Fang, I think, is the band at its rawest and probably most focused form. I think it's kind of widely seen as one of the better rock albums of that year also. I think what's great about this release is it's being released with the original artwork, which was a little controversial when the album got released. I know it did end up getting released with some alternate artwork, so it's nice to see that they're going back to the original artwork for the album. But the Distillers are one of those bands I'd love to see them get back together and release some more music. And also Black and White America by Lenny Kravitz getting reissued. Came out back in 2011. It was his 9th studio album. 2 LP release. It's going to run about $35. It was his usual blend of funk, rock, and soul. And it was a little more of a politically charged album from Lenny. It was a top 20 album in a bunch of different countries, but I don't think it was as well received here in the US. And to be completely honest, it was an album I had not listened to until Probably within the last 4 or 5 months, I finally listened to it. Because even though I'd grown up listening to Lenny's music, until he released his new album last year, I don't think I'd listened to any of his music since he released Lenny back in, 2001, I think he released it. Is it his best album? No, I don't think it's anywhere close to it, but it's another really good album from him. So it's coming out for, October 3rd, that's coming out. You've also got Good by Morphine getting reissued. Came out back in 1992. It was their debut studio album. It's going to be on forest green vinyl. It's going about $25. It's all newly remastered. It's one of those genre-defying albums of the 90s. Fused rock with blues and jazz. And the early 90s was an interesting time period for rock music. Rock was really changing. And this is one of the more unique sounding albums from that time period. They'll go on to release 4 more albums after this before finally releasing their last album in 2000. And they're one of those bands I don't think really ever got the credit they deserved. The New York Dolls are also releasing Cause I Says So on October 3rd. It was released back in 2009. It was their 4th studio album. It's going to be on red vinyl. It's going to run about $25. This is the band's 2nd studio album after their big reunion, which the reunion really only happened because Morrissey was a lifelong fan of the band, personally asked them to reunite. And this was a surprising comeback album for the band. Of course, New York Dolls, one of those glam rock bands from the 70s who helped lay the foundation for what punk would become. Of course, I don't think they're ever going to be able to recapture what they did in the early part of their career, but their first 2 comeback albums were both really good albums. Their 3rd and final album, it wasn't as great, but there's still some good stuff on it. It's one I probably will still pick up when it gets released on the 3rd. And then you've also got the self-titled album from Porno from Pyros coming out, released in 1993. So this is a Rhino Reserve release. It's going to run you about $32. Of course, Porno for Pyros was the band that was formed by Perry Farrell after the breakup of Jane's Addiction. It was more of an experimental album, but it still did really well. It hit number 3 on the Billboard 200. I was a little surprised to see this on the list for October because I think they just did this as a Start Your Year Off Right release. I think it was last year. It was either last year they did a Start Your Year Off Right release or a Rocktober release last year. I know it was within the last year or so that they released this. Yeah, so it's a little bit different release because it's going to be a Rhino Reserve release. So it's going to be upgraded sound quality on this one. These are all supposed to be cut from the original analog tapes. I've heard nothing but great reviews of these releases so far, so that's what I'm looking forward to. There's also the big David Lee Roth box set coming out on October 3rd. The Warner Recordings, 1985 to 1994. So this is a 5 LP box set. It's going to run you about $125. So this features all of his first 5 solo albums from 85 to 1994. These albums really highlight Dave's more unique music style in his post-Van Halen years. So what you're getting in this box set, you've got Crazy from the Heat from 85. You've got Eat 'em and Smile from 86. Skyscraper from 88. You've got A Little Ain't Enough from 91. And Your Filthy Little Mouth from 1994. The interesting thing is, I've always been more of a David Lee Roth Van Halen fan than a Sammy Hagar Van Halen fan, but I was never a huge fan of David Lee Roth's solo material. I did like his first couple of albums. I do need to get them on vinyl. I'm not sure if I'm going to break down and buy the entire box set, though. I probably don't need the entire box set if I can just find those first couple of albums. But for $125, I don't think it's a bad price, especially if I can find it on sale somewhere. So that's coming out on the 3rd. And then this next one, this is probably the most surprising album that I saw on the list for this year. Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks. It was released in 1977. It was a debut and only studio album from the Sex Pistols. It's going to run you about $25. It's going to be on clear vinyl. The reason why this is so surprising to me is Rhino just did a copy of this last year. I don't remember if it was I think it was for Start Your Year Off Right last year. I think it was on green vinyl. It was either on green or pink vinyl they did last year. So they did a copy of that last year. They're doing a copy of it for Rocktober this year. And they just announced that they're doing a Rhino High Fidelity release of this, which if there's any album that doesn't need a high fidelity release, it's this album. I have a long list of negative things to say about the Sex Pistols, but it's hard to argue about the influence that this album had. I've been a huge fan of the Rhino High Fidelity releases so far, so I'm interested to read reviews of that Sex Pistols release. I don't know. If you don't have a copy of it, you know, paying the $25 for this Rocktober release, it'd probably be just fine instead of dropping the extra money for the high fidelity release. There's also the Blue Moods of Spain by Spain coming out, released in 1995. It was their debut studio album. 2 LP releases be on blue vinyl. It's going to about $35. This is one of the rare albums on this list that I have never heard of before. At least I don't remember hearing anything off of it before. I even scrolled down through the list on Wikipedia to see if I remember the title of any of the singles off the album. I don't remember any of that. So it's definitely one I need to check out before it gets released on the 3rd. If you're a fan of this album, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of it. And then one that I definitely have on my list that I want to pick up on the 3rd is the self-titled album from the Stone Temple Pilots, released in 2010. It was their 6th studio album. It's going to be on red vinyl. It's going to run about $25. This was the band's first album since Shangri-La-Di-Da in 2001, which I thought was a huge disappointment of an album. But this self-titled album would be the last album with Scott Weiland on vocals. And then in 2013, the band would fire Scott, and then he would die in 2015. Oddly enough, this would be the first of 2 consecutive self-titled albums from the band. This album received some mixed reviews when it was released, but I thought it was way better than anything off of Shangri-La-Di-Da. And it's the only album from the band with Scott on vocals that I don't have on vinyl, so it's definitely one I'm going to grab. There's also The Least Worst Of by Typo Negative coming out. It was released in 2000. It's going to run about $37. So this is a compilation of previously released songs. There's also remixes on here. There's several unreleased tracks also. The album's become a fan favorite over the years and really highlights their influence in goth rock. I've never been a huge fan of Typo Negative, but they're another one of those bands where I can definitely respect the influence that they've had on music. So that one's coming out on the 3rd. You've also got the Von Bondi's Pawn Shop Heart. Came out back in 2004. It was their 2nd studio album. It's actually their major label debut, though. It's going to run about $32. It's another one of those Rhino Reserve releases. This is another one of those albums where I haven't heard a whole lot off of it. I know the single Come On, Come On received a lot of radio airplay when it was released, but I don't think I've heard anything else off of this album. I know it was influential, though, in spurring some of that 2000s garage rock revival, though. So it's definitely another one of those albums I need to revisit before the 3rd. And then rounding out the list for October 3rd is 2 albums from Yes. The first one is 90125, came out back in 1983. It was their 11th studio album. It's a Rhino Reserve release, running about $32. And this is a really important album for Yes. It was a big stylistic change for the band. This is the album where they started incorporating more like pop and new wave into their music. And it worked because it ended up being a hugely successful album for them. It go on to become one of their best known and highest selling albums. And I think this was the album that I first started listening to Yes on. Obviously, it wasn't when this album came out. It was probably like late 80s when I first heard this album. And once I heard this album, that's when I started digging through some of their other stuff. This has long been my favorite album from the band. It's one I don't have on vinyl. I probably should grab a copy of that one. We'll see if I end up grabbing one, though. And then the last album I got is Big Generator. Came out back in 1987. It was their 12th studio album. It's going to be on orange vinyl. It's going about $25. So this one maintained the pop stylings that they used on the previous album, but incorporated a little more of that progressive rock roots that the band had. It wasn't quite as successful as the previous album. It still did really well, though. Hit number 15 on the Billboard 200, sold a bunch of copies here in the US. I think it was the success that they had with 90125. They tried to use this album to kind of bridge their older fans with their newer fans, and it worked in some areas and didn't work in others. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you guys are looking forward to on October 3rd. Like I said, this is just the 16 titles coming out on that first Friday in October. There's lots of other stuff coming out for October. Like I said, I think there's 43 titles overall. So this is just the first video in a series of videos I'm going to do over the next couple of days. So make sure you come back and check out those other videos when they get released, because I think there's a lot of really good stuff coming out from Rhino over the month of October. But let me know what you guys are looking forward to. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.